It was 1:12 a.m. when I got the message, "Don't come home for Christmas. Lena needs this to be perfect." I froze. Just 6 months ago, I saved their house from foreclosure. I emptied my savings, sold my rental, and paid off their debt. No conditions, no questions. And now I'm not welcome. My name is Rachel Bennett, and I'm the daughter they erased to make room for a lie. But they forgot one thing: I don't give gifts without receipts, and this year I'm not unwrapping guilt. I'm delivering consequences. This Christmas, the silence ends. I'm coming for everything they owe me. The screen's glow pierced through the darkness of my apartment, cold and blue against the dim Chicago skyline outside my window. I blinked, rereading the message over and over, hoping it might change. "Please don't come home for Christmas. Lena needs this to be perfect." That was it. No explanation, no warmth, just rejection. Neatly typed and delivered by my mother, Susan Bennett. I stared at the phone, my chest tightening like a vice. I could hear the silence around me, feel it settle over my shoulders like frost. My apartment, once a refuge, suddenly felt sterile and hollow. There were no blinking lights, no tree, no garlands. I hadn't bothered decorating this year. Why would I? I'd been planning to spend Christmas back home by the lake in the house I saved. 6 months ago, they were on the edge of losing it all. Dad called me in a panic. Gerald Bennett, usually stoic, his voice trembling as he explained the foreclosure notice on their doorstep. Medical bills, bad investments, and the cherry on top. Lena had maxed out their credit cards, chasing some half-baked social media venture. They were drowning, and they came to me. I didn't hesitate. I sold the small rental property I'd spent 10 years fixing up. I liquidated my brokerage account, kissed goodbye to every cent I had saved. In total, $52,000. I wired it the same day. No contracts, no demands, just trust, just love. "We'll pay you back," Dad had said, his eyes red-rimmed. "You saved us," Mum whispered, holding my hands like a lifeline. Lena, she didn't even show up. The memory was a knife now, twisting in my ribs as I sat in my chair, clutching the phone. They forgot all of that. They erased it like a typo. And for what? So Lena could impress her co-workers? Lena, the family star, the beautiful, charming younger sister who just needed time to figure it out. Law school dropout, serial job hopper. At one point, she'd convinced our parents to co-sign for a fourth car loan after wrecking the previous 3. She swiped their cards to stay at 5-star hotels for networking events, and once borrowed $8,000 from me with a promise of repayment next month. That was 3 years ago. Yet, through it all, Mum and Dad defended her like she was the sun and I was the shadow. "She's just finding herself," Mum would say. "You're the strong one," Dad told me, as if strength was a substitute for affection. When Lena made mistakes, they called it growth. When I held her accountable, they called it cruelty. I looked around my apartment again, no voices, no laughter, just the hum of the heater and the echo of what I used to believe. That if I just gave enough, did enough, held the family together tight enough, they'd see me, choose me, need me. But here I was, 35 years old, alone in a city I moved to for a job I took so I could send money back home. Alone in the apartment I could barely afford anymore. And now not even welcome for the holidays. I swallowed hard, setting the phone down with shaking hands. I should have seen this coming. The signs had been there for years. The cancelled birthdays, the missed calls. The way Lena's needs always came first. How I was always expected to understand, to sacrifice. My jaw clenched as a new thought took root, cold and clear. Maybe I had sacrificed enough. A second ping jolted the silence. I didn't want to look, but curiosity won out. It was from Lena. "Rachel, don't take it personally. You coming would just make everyone uncomfortable. Please understand. I really need this to go smoothly." I stared at her message, each word dripping with condescension, dressed up as diplomacy. "Don't take it personally," as if being disinvited from my own family's holiday gathering after saving their house was just a logistical mishap. Another text followed. My boss and his wife are coming. You can be intense sometimes, and I don't want drama. There it was, the real reason, not awkwardness, not timing. It was about image. Lena didn't want me, her older sister, the one who cleaned up her messes, showing up and ruining her perfectly curated facade. I could practically hear her voice, breathy and practiced, explaining to her co-workers how she came from a supportive family who always believed in her. But that's not the family I knew. I rose from my chair and crossed to the built-in safe in the corner of my closet. Spinning the combination with calm precision, I opened it and pulled out a slim blue folder. The edges were sharp and pristine, untouched for 6 months. Inside, nestled neatly in a protective sleeve, was the property transfer agreement signed, notarized, and legally binding. When I wired the $52,000 to stop the foreclosure, my lawyer, David Clean, had insisted we draw up formal documents. I know they're your parents, he'd said, but you're risking everything. You need protection. I'd hesitated. It felt cold, transactional, but something in my gut told me to listen, and that instinct had just saved me. The agreement clearly stated that Rachel Bennett was the temporary owner of the property for a period of 1 year. At the end of that year, her parents could either repay the full amount at market value or begin paying fair market rent. Failure to do either would result in immediate legal proceedings. They signed without reading the fine print. Desperate and grateful. I didn't expect to ever enforce it, but now it felt like the only language they might understand. I walked back to the kitchen, folder in hand, and set it gently on the counter like a loaded weapon. Then I picked up my phone and dialed. "David Clean," came the groggy voice on the other end after 2 rings. "David, it's Rachel. Sorry to wake you." He paused. "Rachel, is everything all right?" I looked at the messages still glowing on my screen. "Start the proceedings." Another pause. "You're sure you want to initiate?" "Yes," I said, voice steady. "I don't want to wait until after the holidays. I want everything filed by morning." He exhaled. "All right, the documents are ready. I just need the word. You'll get confirmation within the hour. Send the notice directly to their address, certified with a copy to Lena. Understood." I hung up the and leaned against the counter, adrenaline humming under my skin. The ache in my chest was still there, but it was quieter now, muted by clarity. I had spent my whole life trying to be the beautiful daughter, the responsible one, always cleaning up messes, always stepping aside. But somewhere along the way, I had stopped being their daughter and started being their fallback plan, their ATM, their scapegoat. Not anymore. I flipped the folder open and looked at the signatures. Susan and Gerald Bennett, side by side. They had trusted me when they needed me and discarded me when they didn't. They thought I'd stay silent, that I'd swallow my pain and disappear again like always. But I had planned for this quietly, carefully, because deep down I had known this moment would come, that they'd choose her again. And this time I'd be ready. I couldn't sleep. Even after hanging up with David, even after securing the legal path forward, my mind refused to rest. I paced the apartment, the blue folder still sitting on the counter like a silent verdict. The weight of the years clawed at me, and I felt the need to see it all again. Every receipt, every transfer, every moment I tried to hold this family together. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. There, buried beneath work folders and budgeting spreadsheets, was one labelled in plain font evidence. Click. Inside were dozens of subfolders, meticulously organised, screenshots of texts from Lena, bank statements, scanned copies of credit card charges made in our parents' names, charges they didn't even know about until collectors called. Photos of luxury handbags, spa weekends, and private yoga retreats, all posted by Lena on social media, while my mother cried to me over how to pay the heating bill. I opened one document labelled HELOC Withdrawal 2022 and stared at the numbers. Lena had convinced them to open a home equity line just in case, then drained it within 3 months. There were airline charges to Cabo, a week at a brand building retreat, and purchases from stores I'd never stepped foot in. I remembered the first time I discovered one of those charges. I had asked gently, "Why is there a $1,400 charge from the Ritz under Dad's name?" Mum blinked, confused. "Oh, that must be a mistake." I showed her the photo Lena had posted the same day, poolside cocktail in hand with the caption "Manifesting Greatness." And still Mum said, "Let's not jump to conclusions. I'm sure she had a reason. A reason." That was always the defense. Lena always had a reason, an excuse, a context to make her recklessness seem noble or misunderstood. And I was the one who made things uncomfortable by asking questions. Another folder, credit card cosign. Inside were screenshots of the time Lena applied for a new card using Dad's social security number without his knowledge. When I confronted her, she'd laughed it off. "It's not like I'm committing fraud, I'm just leveraging credit," she'd said, flipping her hair. When I told Mum and Dad, they were silent for a moment. Then came the line I'd grown to hate. "Can't you just let it go? It's not worth tearing the family apart." That phrase, it haunted me. It had been weaponized against me so often. I'd memorized the cadence of its delivery. It wasn't just about money. It was the subtle erasure of my voice. Every time I stood up for responsibility, I was accused of being harsh. Every time I tried to hold Lena accountable, I was the villain ruining the vibe. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the mountain of proof. It wasn't just documentation. It was a record of my exile, a breadcrumb trail of how I'd been pushed to the edges, deemed inconvenient for seeing too clearly. I remembered Christmas 3 years ago. I had planned everything: tree, gifts, cooking. Lena showed up late, wearing a new designer coat and carrying nothing. No gifts, no apology. During dinner, she talked over everyone, turned the night into a monologue about her upcoming business launch. And when I tried to redirect the conversation, Mum shushed me. "Let her have this. She needs the encouragement." And I was supposed to smile and swallow it because Rachel, the strong one, could handle it. But strength isn't the same as invisibility. That night, I sat on the floor in my childhood bedroom, tears sliding silently down my face as I stared at the ceiling, wondering what it would take to be seen not as a safety net, but as a daughter. Now I closed the folder and whispered into the quiet, "No more." I opened another subfolder labeled Private Do Not Share. It had sat untouched for months, gathering digital dust like an unopened wound. I clicked it open and was met with one scan in particular that still made my stomach clench. It was a loan application, one I found by accident when helping Dad organize tax documents earlier in the year. The signature at the bottom read Susan Bennett, but I knew my mother's handwriting. Always a soft loop in her S's, a tiny star over her lowercase e's. Quirks that had been part of birthday cards and school permission slips my whole life. This signature wasn't hers. It was Lena's. I had spent hours comparing the loops and strokes, even pulling out old birthday cards for proof. It wasn't a maybe. It was forged. Lena had signed our mother's name to open a line of credit in her own favor. $25,000 gone within weeks. I never told them. I'd deleted the digital trail from Dad's inbox before he could see it. I'd convinced myself I was protecting them from disappointment, from shame, from the reality that their golden child was willing to commit fraud just to keep up appearances. Back then, I justified it as love. I didn't want to fracture the family, didn't want to be the one to pull the thread that unraveled everything. But now, staring at the growing pile of evidence and rereading Lena's smug message, it hit me like a brick. I hadn't protected them. I'd protected her, and in doing so, I had betrayed myself. I picked up my phone and opened the family group chat. The last messages were still there. Mum's clipped formality, Lena's spin, silence from Dad. I typed a single word. Okay, 3 letters, that was all they'd get. The calm before the storm. Next, I pulled up my travel app. A few clicks and a credit card swipe later, I had a first-class ticket to the Molds, departing December the 24th. I'd spend Christmas somewhere warm, somewhere quiet, somewhere thousands of miles away from the house I saved and the family that pretended I didn't exist. As confirmation buzzed into my inbox, I imagined Lena arranging orbs, practicing her laugh, fluffing pillows just right for her boss's arrival. Everything had to be perfect. She was finally hosting, finally playing grown-up, and she thought I'd just vanish quietly to keep her dream intact. I picked up the phone again and dialed. "David Clean," he answered, more alert this time. "It's me, Rachel." "Rachel? Hey, what's next? Send the documents to their house." "No," I said, smiling faintly, "to arrive at exactly 7:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve, right in the middle of Lena's dinner party." He paused. "You sure?" "She made her choice," I said. "Now she gets the bill." "I'll have a courier hand deliver it," he said. "Certified, time-stamped with acknowledgement required." Perfect. As we hung up, I glanced at the clock. Just past 2:00 a.m., my apartment still hummed in quiet, but something inside me shifted. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't crying. I felt focused, sharp. For years, I'd bent over backward to protect a family that saw me as a tool, not a person. I'd blurred my boundaries to keep them comfortable, smothered my own needs to avoid rocking their boat. But no more. This time, I wasn't the silent helper in the background. I was the author of this next chapter, and I would write it in bold ink. SeaTac Airport was unusually quiet for a holiday morning. I sipped a lukewarm oat milk latte in the first-class lounge, eyes half-focused on the muted television broadcasting cheerful holiday ads. Snow drifted lazily outside the wide glass windows, a picturesque scene I was happy to watch from a distance. I had no interest in returning to a house built on guilt. My phone buzzed again and again. 17 unread messages now. Mum. "Rachel, what is this letter? You can't be serious. Call us. Dad, you're overreacting. We'll talk after Christmas. Don't ruin this." Mum again. Lena is beside herself. "Please don't embarrass her. Lena, are you happy now? You've ruined everything. Lena, my boss just got here. The lawyer showed up with papers during dinner. What is wrong with you?" The messages kept pouring in like a flood. Some pleading, some accusatory, others just raw panic. For the first time, I didn't feel crushed under their weight. I felt detached, almost analytical, like I was watching someone else's drama unfold. Then my phone rang. "Lena." I answered without hesitation. Her voice was already breaking. "Rachel, what the hell did you do?" He walked in with a folder in the middle of dinner in front of everyone. "My boss's wife saw it. I'm being humiliated." "You're being held accountable," I replied calmly. "You're destroying the most important night of my life." I let the silence hang for a moment, then asked, "Important to who?" "Lena." "To you? Your image, your carefully scripted story." She sniffled, then snapped. "I worked so hard to make this happen. This night was supposed to prove I've made it, and now my boss thinks I'm some kind of scam artist whose sister is suing her family. Well, I said you forged Mum's signature to open a credit line and funneled money from their retirement if the shoe fits. You're so dramatic." "No, Lena. Dramatic was using Dad's name to lease a Mercedes you couldn't afford. Dramatic was calling me controlling when I refused to co-sign another loan." This, I exhaled. "This is just overdue." There was a long pause. For once, she had no snappy retort. "You could have just talked to me," she whispered. "I did for years. I begged you to be responsible. I begged them to stop enabling you. And every time I was the problem, you blindsided us." I actually laughed, dry and bitter. "No, I prepared for this exact moment. I gave you time. I gave you space. I gave you silence. You used it to erase me." She was quiet again. I leaned back, eyes scanning the elegant lounge, the quiet hum of travelers moving toward destinations filled with people who might actually want them there. "You know what the real problem is, Lena," I said softly. "You've never once considered what anyone else's important night might look like. Mine was 6 months ago when I transferred $500,000 to save a house. I wasn't even welcome in. That was the most important night of my life, and no one even said thank you. She sniffled again but didn't speak. I'm boarding in 20 minutes. I said you can text me if you want to scream more, but just know it won't change anything. You're really going through with this? She asked, small and stunned. Yes, and I should have done it a long time ago. I ended the call before she could respond. Then I silenced my phone, took another sip of my latte, and watched the snow fall. For once, I wasn't rushing to fix everything. I was letting it fall apart. I watched the boarding gate fill slowly, with families wrapped in scarves and layers, laughing children dragging bright suitcases behind them. Their chatter faded beneath the voice in my head. Lena's voice echoing in desperation. You're destroying the most important night of my life. I pulled out my tablet and opened the PDF David had sent me for review. The courier had already delivered the physical copy, but this digital one, it included everything. At the end of the legal notice, stapled behind the ownership agreement was an audio transcript, a 6-month-old recording, a conversation between me, Lena, and David, when we had all sat in his office as I signed over the funds to rescue our family home. I had insisted on her being there, even though she barely showed up on time. Back then, Lena had leaned back in the leather chair, smiling faintly while David explained the terms. I remembered her words exactly. Fine, I get it. I'll start paying them back after the new quarter. Just don't bring it up at Christmas. Let's keep things peaceful. David had paused, pen in hand, and asked, Do you agree to these terms as verbal acknowledgement? She'd replied, Yes, I'll make things right. You have my word. And now her word had unravelled in front of her boss, her co-workers, and their spouses, because David had included that exact transcript in the folder per my instruction. I had felt uneasy back then. Her casual tone, her avoidance of eye contact, the way she used the word peaceful as a way to delay accountability. So I asked David to document the conversation, not just in notes, but by recording it with everyone's consent. I didn't trust that silence would mean safety. I wanted a record. Now that instinct had become Lena's undoing. I imagined the courier stepping into their lakefront living room right as hors d'oeuvres were being served. The envelopes bearing the Bennett name handed directly to Mum and Dad, Lena, opening hers while trying to maintain a hostess smile, and then reading not only the legal eviction warning, but a full transcription of her own words, her own promises. I could almost see her panic bloom behind her eyes. Her boss curious, his wife raising an eyebrow, the murmurs around the table, the realization that the woman they'd admired for her poise and hustle had just been exposed as a manipulative opportunist and worse, a liar. My phone vibrated again, this time not a call, just a voicemail. I played it through my AirPods as the gate agent announced pre-boarding. Dad! Rachel, we got the papers. This is too far. We didn't know you'd taken it so seriously. We thought it was all just family stuff. Your mother's crying. Lena's a wreck. Please come back. Let's figure this out. I let the message run, but I didn't reply. Instead, I tapped out a final message in the group chat. You have until January 15th. Buy the house or start paying rent. If you don't, proceedings continue. Then a separate text to Lena. This isn't revenge. This is reality. I warned you. I gave you time. You gambled with our parents' home and your word. I'm just collecting. No emojis, no warmth, just truth. The gate agent called my boarding group and I rose, slinging my bag over my shoulder. I walked toward the jet bridge, calm and composed. Somewhere behind me, Lena was scrambling, lying, blaming, but I wasn't there to hear it. For once, her chaos wasn't my responsibility. The Maldivian sun was warm against my skin, filtered through the white canopy of my private villa. The water just beyond the deck shimmered like blue glass, gently lapping against the stilts. I stretched out on the lounge chair, a book open on my lap, but unread for the last 30 minutes. For the first time in over a decade, I was truly breathing. No emails, no urgent family group chats, no crises to fix, just the hum of nature and my own heartbeat slowing to a normal rhythm. 10 years, that's how long it had been since I took a real vacation. Not a 3-day holiday weekend with my laptop nearby. Not a family reunion where I spent the whole time playing referee between my parents and Lena. A real soul-level escape. And oddly, it had taken legal action to finally earn it. I closed my eyes and let the breeze brush across my face. The air smelled like salt and sun and faint coconut. A waiter brought a chilled coconut drink garnished with mint, and I thanked him with a smile that surprised even me. It felt real. My phone buzzed on the side table. I glanced at the screen. Grandma Margaret. Video call. My chest softened. If there was one person in my family who never made me feel like I had to earn my place, it was her. I answered, her face lit up the screen, framed by grey curls and a pair of reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. "Oh, sweetheart," she said before I could speak. "You look like a different person already." I laughed softly. "I feel like one." She smiled. "You needed this. You've needed it for years." I didn't realize how badly I admitted. She leaned in, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "I assume you've heard the chaos back home?" I raised an eyebrow. "I've received updates." Grandma chuckled, but there was an edge in her voice. "Rachel, your parents are in complete shock. Gerald tried to act like it's just a misunderstanding at first, but when they opened that packet, Lord have mercy. And Lena," she shook her head. "She practically melted down in front of guests." "Sounds like Christmas magic," I said dryly. "That's not even the worst part," Margaret continued. "Turns out your cousin Elise was there and your Aunt Sylvia, and guess what they found out?" I leaned forward. "What?" "That Lena's been lying about her job for months." I blinked. "What do you mean? She's not some high-level strategist like she claims. Her position is mostly freelance, no benefits, barely consistent work. The whole image she's been selling, designer bags, first-class flights, hosting dinners like she's royalty, it's all debt. And smoke." I didn't respond right away. The pit in my stomach returned faint but sharp. Grandma went on, "When that courier arrived and handed your parents those documents, Elise told me the room went dead silent. And when Lena's boss asked her what it was about, she cracked. Couldn't lie fast enough. She just kept saying it's family stuff like a mantra. So now everyone knows," I murmured. "Now," Grandma said gently, "they see what you've seen for years." I felt an odd combination of vindication and sadness. I had never wanted Lena to fail. I just wanted her to be honest, accountable, human. "I didn't want it to happen like this," I admitted. "I know," Grandma said, "but it had to happen. They needed to see the truth laid bare. And sometimes, Rachel, truth needs a little paperwork behind it to be heard." We sat in silence for a moment, just watching each other breathe across continents. "Take your time, sweetheart," she said at last. "You've spent so long holding your breath for everyone else. It's okay to finally breathe for you." I smiled. "Thanks, Grandma." The ocean sparkled behind me as I sat on the shaded deck. Grandma's face still bright on the screen. I could tell there was more, something she hadn't said yet. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her cardigan, eyes dropping for a beat before she looked back up with quiet resolve. "There's something else," she said. I straightened. "What is it?" She took a breath, her voice soft but steady. "I updated my will last month." I blinked, not understanding immediately. "Why are you telling me that now?" "Because," she continued, "I made you the guardian of the family trust." Effective immediately, I stared at her. "You what?" She nodded. "It used to be your parents with Lena as secondary, but after everything I've watched these past few years, especially this Christmas, I couldn't leave our legacy in their hands." I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "But Grandma, that's huge." "It is," she said firmly, "and it's necessary." I let the words sink in, guardian of the trust. That meant I would oversee how funds were spent, who received what, and under what conditions. It meant I could ensure Lena didn't drain what little wealth our grandparents had built through decades of hard work. It's not to punish them, Grandma added quickly. It's to protect everyone and, frankly, to give you some power after years of being powerless. I looked down, fingers tightening around my coconut drink. A part of me wanted to feel triumphant. Another part just felt tired. So what does this mean for Lena? I asked. She's still named, Grandma said, but I've included a clause. She won't receive a cent unless she completes a financial rehabilitation program and proves in writing that she's debt-free and independently stable for at least a year. My eyes widened. That's very specific. She smiled wryly. I had help. One of my bridge friends has a lawyer granddaughter. I couldn't help but laugh even as my chest ached. You really thought of everything. I've been watching longer than you realize, she said, her voice gentler now. I saw what Lena was doing. I saw how your parents let it happen. But I also saw how you handled it quietly, gracefully, with more patience than most would ever manage. I looked away from the screen, tears pricking unexpectedly at the corners of my eyes. Not out of happiness, not even relief, just the bitter sting of finally being seen. Rachel, Grandma said softly, you've always been the strong one, but strength doesn't mean going it alone. I nodded, forcing back the wave of emotion. Thank you. Really? She tilted her head. How are you feeling now? Truly, I thought for a moment before answering, better, not whole, but better. Like for once, I'm not carrying everyone. And maybe, she added, you're not carrying yourself alone anymore either. That hit something deep. For so long, I'd been alone, even in a crowded room. I'd played the part of the invisible caretaker, the silent problem mover. But now, with one conversation and one signature, I had a true ally. And yet there was a sadness too, because the person I once hoped would stand beside me was now the reason I needed to stand alone. I still wish it wasn't like this, I admitted. I know, she said, but we can't choose who betrays us. We can only choose what we do after. I nodded, staring out at the sea. The waves rolled in, steady and calm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was drowning. The wheels of the plane touched down in Chicago with a soft jolt. The sky outside was a muted grey, thick with the kind of winter cold that crept through your coat and into your bones. I stepped off the flight wrapped in a scarf, my suitcase trailing behind me, but my heart carried a warmth the city couldn't touch. Not anymore. My apartment greeted me with its familiar silence. No lights on, no flickering candles, no decorations, just the hum of the refrigerator and the echo of my footsteps on the hardwood floor. It felt more like a container than a home, just walls and objects and air, but strangely, I didn't mind. I had learned how to fill my own spaces. I dropped my bag and plugged in my phone, which had died somewhere over the Atlantic. The screen came to life instantly, lighting up with new notifications, texts from co-workers, junk mail, delivery updates, and one message from Grandma Margaret. They want to talk, all of them, tomorrow evening. I think they're ready to listen. I stared at it for a long moment, the words heavier than they looked. A week ago, that kind of message might have filled me with hope or anxiety or guilt. Now, it simply felt like a scheduled event. I tapped out a reply. Okay, they can come to my place. 6 p.m. I paused, then added, no Lena speeches. No, let's keep the peace talk. If they're coming, they're listening. Margaret replied almost instantly, understood. And Rachel, I'm proud of you. I turned off the screen and exhaled. There was no joy in what was coming, no sense of triumph. But there was peace, the kind that comes not from being right, but from finally being done with pretending. I spent the next day cleaning my place, not because I wanted to impress them, but because I needed the space to feel like mine again. I cleared off the dining table, lit a single candle, and left out a picture of water, no snacks, no wine. This wasn't a gathering, it was a reckoning at 5:55 p.m., and I stood by the window watching the snow fall against the amber glow of the streetlights. My reflection looked back at me, tired but steady. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was bracing for impact. At exactly 6 centimeters, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find all of them standing there. My mother wrapped in her old cashmere coat. My father, visibly smaller somehow, his hands jammed into his pockets. And Lena, dressed down in jeans and a sweater, her face bare of makeup. They filed in without a word. No hugs, no fake smiles, just silence. I gestured toward the living room. Sit wherever you like. No one moved at first. Then Mum sat on the edge of the couch, Dad beside her, and Lena took the far end, her hands folded tightly in her lap. I didn't sit. I stayed standing just behind the dining chair, my arms crossed loosely in front of me. So I said, "You wanted to talk?" Mum glanced at Dad, then back at me. We've had a hard week," I raised an eyebrow. "Try a decade." Dad opened his mouth but said nothing. "I assume you've all read the documents by now," I continued, "and I assume you understand the terms. January 15th, that's the deadline. Either buy the house or start paying rent." Mum swallowed hard. "We didn't know you felt this way." "Because you never asked," I said. They looked at each other, unsure. Lena kept her eyes down. "I'm not here for apologies," I said. "I'm here to lay out what happens next. I'm done waiting for everyone to choose me." I stepped around the dining chair and placed a folder on the coffee table, the same calm I'd carried through the molds, now wrapping around me like armor. "There are 3 paths forward," I said, flipping open the folder. "And you're going to choose one." They stared, stunned, into silence. I pointed to the first page. Option 1, you sell the house. Downsize. There are several smaller properties in the area well within reach, especially if you liquidate Lena's luxury items and the unnecessary timeshare in Aspen. Mum opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "Let me finish." I flipped to the second page. Option 2. Dad, you restart that small accounting firm you always dreamed of. I've worked with my lawyer to draft a realistic business plan. If you're serious, I'll loan the startup capital with actual terms this time. Dad blinked, visibly shaken. He glanced down at the page, lips parting, then closing again. "And option 3. I paused, locking eyes with Lena. "You enter a financial recovery and accountability program. 6 months minimum therapy, education, full transparency, and you submit to monthly check-ins with a certified financial counselor." Her face went pale. "You complete the program, prove you're managing money responsibly, and the trust fund Grandma set up might still be accessible someday. But until then, it's locked." Lena sat frozen for a beat, then snapped. "This is insane. You think you can just dictate our lives like some?" Before she could finish, Dad's voice cut across the room, low and firm. "Lena, stop." The air shifted. We all turned to him. He didn't look angry. He looked exhausted. Years of denial seemed to sit heavy on his shoulders. And yet, in that moment, there was something new in his eyes. Clarity. "Just let your sister finish," he said. Lena slumped back, lips pressed into a tight line. I turned to him and nodded slightly before continuing. "You've all been operating like I'm a backup plan," I said. "But I'm not a bank. I'm not your fixer. I'm not your emotional punching bag. I'm your daughter. And if you want to rebuild this family, then it starts with responsibility." I closed the folder and looked at each of them in turn. "These aren't punishments, they're opportunities. But you don't get them unless you act. And you don't get to drag me through the mud while pretending everything's fine." Mum's eyes brimmed with tears. "Rachel, I didn't realize how far we'd pushed you." "That's the problem," I replied. "No one realized. No one noticed because it was easier to keep asking for more than to stop and ask if I was okay." Lena didn't speak again. She was staring at the floor, shoulders tight, mouth drawn. Dad leaned forward and placed a hand on the folder. "And if we agree, then we move forward," I said. "I'll support you, but only if you're serious. One misstep, one lie. And it all ends. The paperwork is ready. I just need signatures." Silence settled between us, heavy but not hostile. just real. I know this isn't what any of you expected, I added, but I've stopped expecting them to change without help. So this is the only way. Mum nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. And Dad, he said, nothing more. He just picked up the folder and started reading. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence in my apartment was different this time, not hostile or suffocating, but fragile, like freshly broken ice beneath our feet. Mum's hands were clutched in her lap, twisting the edge of a tissue that hadn't been used yet. Dad had gone quiet, his eyes fixed on the printed words in the folder in front of him. Lena, she hadn't looked up once since her outburst. Her breathing was shallow, her shoulders tense as if she were physically bracing for more. And then softly, Mum spoke. You know, she started, voice barely above a whisper. We always said Lena needed more help, that she was just lost, not bad, that if we could just support her long enough, she'd find her way. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red, but not from crying yet. They were red from restraint, from years of ignoring things she hadn't wanted to confront. I thought I was protecting her, she said, but I didn't see what I was doing to you. A part of me tensed, preparing for excuses. Another round of justifications, but they didn't come. Instead, she exhaled slowly and said, We chose the one we thought was weaker because it made us feel like better parents. I blinked, my throat catching before I could even process the words. Mum's voice broke as she continued, but all we really did was hurt the one who never asked for anything. I stared at her, heart pounding, of all the things I'd imagined her saying. Please, rationalizations, guilt, this. I hadn't expected this. I dreamed of hearing it, maybe, fantasized in some corner of my mind that one day they'd see it, admit it. But to hear it now, here in this small apartment where I'd nursed so many quiet heartbreaks, it cracked something open in me. You called me the strong one, I said, my voice shaking. But being strong doesn't mean not needing love. Mum nodded, her face folding into itself. I know. Tears finally slid down her cheeks. You've always been so capable, so put together. I thought maybe you didn't need us the way she did. I laughed, but it came out sharp. So you gave everything to the one who needed more and left the one who gave more with nothing. She winced, but didn't deny it. I kept waiting for you to see it, I continued. Every time I bailed you out, every time I said it's fine and wired the money or kept the peace, I kept thinking, maybe now they'll notice. Maybe now I'll matter. You mattered, Mum whispered, anguished. Not enough to protect, I said. Not enough to believe. Not enough to choose. She covered her mouth, the tissue now soaked in her hand. I wasn't trying to hurt her, but I couldn't keep carrying the pain alone, not anymore. It wasn't just about money, I said softer now. It was the erasure, the way my concerns were dismissed, the way Lena's chaos was always met with compassion and mine with silence. Lena finally stirred. Her eyes flicked toward me, but said nothing. You made me the stable one, I told them, and then you used that as an excuse to neglect me. Dad finally looked up, meeting my gaze. There was regret in his expression more than I'd ever seen from him. You're right, he said simply. There's no defense for what we did. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief, not forgiveness, just oxygen. Something I hadn't realized I'd been holding in. Mum reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. I'm sorry, Rachel, she said, for assuming you didn't need to be loved the same way, for leaning on you so hard we never noticed you were tired. Tears blurred my vision. I let them come because the truth was I hadn't needed them to fix it. I just needed them to finally see it. The room sat in delicate silence. My mother's apology still lingered in the air, raw and echoing. It was the closest we'd come to truth in years. And for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, that was the deepest this evening would go. But then Lena shifted. She hadn't said a word since being told to let me speak. Hadn't made eye contact, hadn't moved except to grip her knees tighter every time someone mentioned money or mistakes. Now she looked up slowly, her gaze meeting mine for the first time. "I have something to say," she whispered. I didn't respond. Neither did our parents. She took a breath, then looked at Mum and Dad. "You always said Rachel was the cold one, the serious one, that she didn't get people, that she didn't understand what it meant to support someone emotionally." My stomach clenched. I knew those words well. I'd heard them echoed through holiday whispers, through half-jokes made at my expense during birthdays, through little jabs at the dinner table. "I started that," Lena admitted, her voice cracking. I blinked. "What?" She nodded, shame colouring her cheeks. "Years ago after college, when everyone kept asking why I wasn't more like you, why I hadn't finished law school, why I wasn't saving money, why I didn't have a real job yet. I told them you were too rigid, that you didn't understand love, that you judged people." Dad's jaw tightened. Mum's hand froze over mine. "I told Aunt Sylvia you criticised everyone, that you didn't believe in dreams, that you didn't support me because you were jealous," Lena continued. "And it just spread. I felt dizzy. You created that image." "I didn't know it would stick," she said, eyes brimming. "At first I just wanted to explain why you didn't come to my showcase, why you didn't post about my projects or smile when I bragged. I needed to look like the wounded one, the artistic one, the misunderstood one. You were lying." The pain hit like a wave, not because it was new, but because it confirmed what I'd felt for years. I'd spent so long wondering why relatives acted cool toward me, why my concerns were met with distance. And all this time, it hadn't been a misunderstanding. It had been a campaign. "I'm sorry," she said, tears falling freely now. "I wanted to be seen as the one who needed saving, and I knew that meant pushing you into the role of the one who didn't." No one spoke, not Mum, not Dad, not me. I breathed through it, sat with it, let it hurt. And then, against every instinct that had once told me to shut down, I looked back at her and said, "Okay." Her eyes widened. "Okay, I'll help you," I clarified, "but on my terms, no more secrets, no more manipulation." She nodded rapidly. "You'll sign into a recovery program," I continued. "You'll commit to monthly accountability sessions. You'll surrender all credit cards, all new accounts, and you'll pay back every penny you owe, not just to them, but to me." She hesitated for the briefest moment, then said, "Yes, I will." I turned to my parents. "That goes for you both too. Transparency, honesty, you want my support? Earn it." Dad placed a hand on the folder again. "We're ready." Mum gave a shaky nod, reaching for Lena's hand. "We all are." And for the first time, they weren't saying it to plate me. They weren't making promises with crossed fingers behind their backs. They were scared. But more than that, they were grounded, ready to work, not just wish. I sat down across from them, the tension in my body softening. We made a plan that night, a real one. Lena would check into a treatment program within the week. Dad would begin putting together the paperwork for his new firm, using the seed loan I would offer through a third-party contract. Mum would liquidate unused luxury goods and cancel non-essential subscriptions. They would list the house, yes, the lake house, for sale. It wasn't punishment, it was a reset. A family that had run on crisis and codependency was now trying to run on truth. And even though the trust had been broken in 1,000 places, we were finally learning how to rebuild. Not by pretending nothing happened, but by admitting everything that did. The snow had returned to Chicago with a quiet fury. Outside my apartment window, thick flakes danced between high-rise buildings, blurring the city skyline into something soft and unfamiliar. I sat at the kitchen counter with a mug of cinnamon tea, the steam curling around my face, my laptop opened to a new email notification from the treatment center. Subject, Weekly Progress Update, Lena Bennett. I clicked it open, bracing myself. Lena had been at the center for almost 3 weeks now. A full month of digital silence, restricted phone access, monitored therapy, and financial accountability training. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't something she could spin into a story for Instagram. And that, ironically, made it the most honest thing she'd ever done. The email was written by her assigned therapist. Straightforward and clinical, but laced with small signs of effort. Lena is engaging, though resistant at times. She struggles most with personal responsibility, but is showing signs of increased awareness around patterns of avoidance, entitlement, and guilt projection. She has acknowledged fabrications made in the past regarding family dynamics and appears motivated to address long-standing trust issues. It wasn't glowing, but it was real. I exhaled slowly and replied with a short note of gratitude to the center. Then I closed the laptop and stared out at the snow, remembering the girl who once lied about me to preserve her own image, and wondering who she might become if she finally let the masks fall. My phone vibrated next to my mug. A new message from Grandma Margaret. "Margaret, just checking in. How's our girl doing?" I typed out a brief summary of the update, then hesitated before adding, "She's trying. It's not easy, but it looks like she's really doing the work." A few seconds passed, then her reply came through. "Sometimes love looks like a soft hand. Sometimes it looks like a slammed door. Both can be acts of mercy, but the kind that lasts, that's the love that says no and means it." I reread her words twice, then again, the love that says no, it still felt foreign. That saying no could be an expression of care, not cruelty. That refusing to rescue someone wasn't abandonment, but an invitation for them to stand up on their own. I thought of all the times I'd bit my tongue to keep peace. All the times I'd wired money or covered lies or kept quiet when the truth might have cracked our fragile family dynamic wide open. And for what? For silence, for invisibility, for more pain. Saying no had been the scariest thing I'd ever done, but it had also saved us. A knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. I patted over in socks and opened it to find a delivery man holding a small package. "Rachel Bennett?" he asked. I nodded, signed, and took the slim box with no return address. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, was a handwritten letter and a small hand-carved wooden charm. The note was from Lena. "Rachel, I'm still not sure who I am without the performance, but for the first time, I'm trying to find out. This charm is something I made in one of our art sessions. The therapist asked us to create something that represents a new beginning. So, I made this a key without a door. Because maybe, just maybe, the door is something I need to build myself. Thank you for slamming yours. It taught me how to knock again." Lena, I traced the little wooden charm in my palm, its edges rough but shaped with care. A key without a door, a beginning without permission. She had a long way to go, we all did. But maybe beginnings didn't need to be perfect. Maybe they just needed to be honest. I placed the charm on my bookshelf between two framed photos, one of me and Grandma from my college graduation, and the other a childhood snapshot of Lena and me, bundled in coats, cheeks red from laughter. Then I returned to my tea, warmer now than before. Outside, the snow kept falling. The charm from Lena still sat on my shelf when the unexpected email arrived the next afternoon. I almost deleted it at first glance. I thought it was another holiday discount offer. The subject line was simple. "Regarding your sister and you, the sender, Danielle Morgan, Executive Director at Bastion and Current Communications, the very firm Lena had boasted about for months. Her big opportunity, the one she'd designed that entire Christmas dinner to impress." I clicked it open, half dreading what it might say. "Ms. Bennett, I hope this message finds you well. I understand we've never met, but I wanted to reach out personally after everything that unfolded over the holidays. I was at the Bennett residence on Christmas Eve, and I witnessed what at the time seemed like an absolute disaster. A woman confronting her family with the kind of composure, grace, and directness that frankly stunned the entire room. In the week since, I've heard your name more than a few times. From mutual contacts, from your grandmother, who is quite the force, and yes, from Lena herself. Your ability to manage an emotionally fraught situation with clarity, legal preparedness, and emotional insight. It stayed with me. Most people collapse in the face of family chaos. You stood in it and brought structure. I stared at the screen frozen. I've recently launched a private consultancy arm at our firm focused on conflict navigation in legacy families. Something I think you could offer a rare and valuable perspective on. If you're open to it, I'd love to speak about the possibility of bringing you on as a crisis strategist. Your story isn't just powerful, it's instructive. No pressure, just curiosity and respect. Warmly, Danielle Morgan. I read it again. Then again, me hired to help others navigate the kind of dysfunction I'd spent my entire adult life surviving. It felt surreal, but also right, because maybe this was what healing looked like. Not a full circle, but a new path built from the wreckage of the old one. A path not just for me, but maybe for others too. I stood slowly, walking over to the window, the city outside awash in grey and white. The snow hadn't stopped, but it didn't seem bitter anymore. The frost against the glass didn't sting. The wind howling down the alleyway wasn't a threat. Just winter being winter. I placed a hand against the window pane and let the cold press into my skin. Not to punish, but to remind that I was here, whole, unbroken, that I'd made it, behind me. My phone chimed again. Another message from Grandma. I heard about the email. Told you they'd notice. Sometimes when you build a boundary, it becomes a beacon. I smiled. So much of my life had been spent dimming myself to keep the peace, softening my voice so others wouldn't feel threatened, folding myself into smaller shapes so someone else could stretch their chaos across the room. But silence isn't peace. And peace without boundaries isn't love. It's just quiet desperation. I'd learned that the hard way. But now, with my family slowly repairing, with my own center finally rooted, I understood something far more valuable than any validation or inheritance could offer. That my worth was never tied to what I tolerated. That love, real love, didn't ask you to disappear. It asked you to stay visible and accountable. Outside, the snow continued falling, 1,000 soft little boundaries between the sky and the earth. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel cold watching it. I felt free.